Hello and welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We are excited about this morning and the next several days. But first, this morning, Dr. Jason Johnson, a political contributor to MSNBC and a host of a podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson on Slate.com, will be our guest. Sree Sreenivasan, of course, is our host. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer of the show. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. We also want to do a big hello and a welcome to our friends at Scroll. Yes, we are also on Scroll's Facebook and YouTube pages, the leading digital media organization in India. So we're so thrilled to be partnering with Scroll to bring you this show. So everyone watching in India, 7 p.m. India Standard Time, welcome. And of course, let us know where you're watching from. That's always one of the best parts of the show, to be able to show where people are watching. We'll put your comments on the air. We'll give you a quick hello, particularly to our regulars. And we have a great set of shows coming up. As a quick update, and Sree will share more details later, but we want to make sure you know about all of these shows. Sree's special election coverage, 7 hours live on Scroll social channels over the next several days. We'll also be live with Indian Express Tuesday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, India Standard Time. More on that later. But first, let's welcome a few folks who are watching. Patricia Freudenberg is watching from New York. Thank you, Patricia. And we have Doug Levy saying good morning from Nevada, where we need to get out every vote. Let's go ahead and bring on our host, Sree Sreenivasan, to continue with the hellos. Sree, good to see you.
Good to see you, Neil. I am delighted to be with all of you, and what an exciting morning. It's Sunday. We have Dr. Jason Johnson here. He's going to give us so many insights about the election, and that's what these next 4 days are about for us. We are live today. We're live tomorrow, Election Day. We have 2 shows, 3 shows. We want to give you as much insight about what's happening, understanding of the latest state of the game, as well as where we're headed. And we have people watching from all over. Sujana Chandrasekhar saying it's T-2 to Election Day. Kaveri Madhavan's watching from Ireland. Thank you so much. The tension of the last final days is palpable. Looking forward to listening to Dr. Jason Johnson. I see that Sudha Parekh is watching. She's a fan of Jason because she watches MSNBC regularly. And Diane Stefani's watching from Margate, New Jersey. We have Ken Fisher watching from Cedar Rapids in Iowa. Iowa is where this all starts, of course. So thank you, everybody, for joining us and for being part of our show. We have a very exciting day, and our show starts with Dr. Jason Johnson. So let's tell you very quickly about us. I am Sree Sreenivasan, and Digimentors produces the show. Digimentors is my social digital consulting AI business. We make shows like this. So if you'd like one, let us know. We also do event amplification and AI workshops that I've been teaching for more than 2 years now. And we have been also doing AI policy, strategy, scenario planning. And we are sponsored by Muckrack. You all know, if you're a journalist, you know Muckrack very well. And if you're a PR, you also know Muckrack. If you'd like to be a sponsor, write to us, Sree@Digimentors.group and Neil@Digimentors.group. Now we want to bring on Dr. Jason Johnson. He is a political contributor to MSNBC. He's a podcast host. He's a professor, and he is very, very busy. But we are so grateful that he could be with us for about 45 minutes this morning. Thank you very much. And hello, Jason.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Sree. I really do appreciate this. And hello to the international audience. I spent quite a few years covering elections for Al Jazeera. So I am used to being able to explain things to people who aren't here about the bizarre and unique nature of the American electoral system. So if anyone has those kinds of questions, I can lay them out for you.
Yes, thank you. But bizarre and unique, I think, are good ways to look at it. My wife Rupa is watching here in New York. Kaveri says, I hope your blood pressure is in check. I think she's talking to me, but how about you? How are you feeling, Jason?
Okay, this is hilarious. Literally, this morning, my mother texted me right before the show and sent me her blood pressure thing. She sent me one of the handheld things, and she's like, "I'm just checking on you." Blah blah blah. So thank you, Chalbri. Thank you. You are literally along the same lines as my mom, who just asked me to send me to send. She's like, "You haven't sent your blood pressure in a couple of days." I was like, "I'm sorry, Mom. I've been busy."
A little busy. You've been a little busy. So tell us a little bit about how you're going to spend the next 3 days and what we should be looking for. What are you looking for?
So here's the thing. It's generic to say this is the Super Bowl. It's not the Super Bowl, right? That's a one-day event. This is more like the World Cup. Because it's several days of pre and post analysis. We've had 2 weeks going into this election where everybody's looking at early voting and everything else like that. We'll go into that in more detail. But over the next 48 hours, someone like me will be doing various podcasts, various radio shows, local shows, national shows, international shows, doing clips and interviews. I get all sorts of emails from journalists all over the country, from the UK, from Australia, from South Africa, from China, from Iran. Sometimes you get contacted by all sorts of different people. And then on election night, it's kind of a grab bag. Sometimes you are in studio. Sometimes you are at one of the locations for the sort of campaign parties. I know that Vice President Harris is going to be at Howard University. So I may be at Howard. I may be in studio. I may be home doing virtual hits. It's all kind of up in the air. There's a real scramble. And since we're not going to know a lot of things easily, I just literally was just texting with a colleague this morning. They're not going to be done with all the vote counting until maybe Wednesday or Thursday for the state of Georgia, right? So we're not going to know what the result is on election night unless there's some sort of blowout one way or another. So yeah, my job will just be to be accessible, be available, answer all the questions I get, and see what democracy, if it functions the way it's supposed to.
If it functions. We're having a fun event at home on November 16th, and I've been telling people you're welcome to our event if there is a November 16th. So we joke about this because otherwise, if we don't laugh, we will cry all the time. But on a more serious note, the election is, everybody tells us, is close, very close. What is your sense of where we are as of this morning? We're talking about, of course, just 2 days before the election.
I generally, so three quick points. One, to the degree that it matters in your particular state, the polling isn't that important at this point, right? What you have in the last 2 weeks, everybody aims no undecided voters. I've never really believed in undecided voters. I say that I'm a political scientist. I have a PhD in political science. My area of expertise is campaign management from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I don't just come at this from a gut instinct. I come at this from a theoretical perspective. I don't believe in undecided voters, never have. What you have, though, in the last 2 weeks is you have late deciders. Now, a late decider is not necessarily I'm deciding between Trump and Harris. Late deciders are often deciding, am I going to bother to vote or not, right? They already have a semi-preference. They're just deciding, am I going to bother? Am I going to get in line? Am I going to go do it, right? So what I have seen is it appears as though late deciders are choosing Harris. People who have decided at the last minute that they're going to bother to vote are choosing Harris. Doesn't necessarily guarantee anything, but that's the polling that I see. The second thing that I see is that there appears to be a huge increase in early voting amongst Republicans, right? Republicans are very excited about that. They say it's great, blah, blah, blah. They talk about Nevada. We've got an advantage in early voting. Okay, that's fine. The catch is that you can't really determine what early voting is because we also have a term called like election day cannibalizing, right? Your early voting doesn't really matter if it's somebody who, let's say in 2020, you voted on election day. In 2024, you voted early. That's not a new voter, right? That's not someone that's adding to your point total. It's just somebody who's voting early. So it doesn't necessarily say, oh, do I get my paycheck on Thursday? If I get my paycheck on Thursday, it doesn't make it worth more than if I get my paycheck on Tuesday. So that's the other thing I've looked at. I see the early vote totals. The only early vote totals that really matter, I think, are new voters. So you have a state like Georgia where 300,000 people in Georgia who did not vote in Georgia in 2020 are voting in 2024. That is a huge number of people. And my guess is that's probably new residents to Georgia who have moved there because Metro Atlanta is growing so much, right? New residents probably more likely to leave Democrat because it's people coming from New York and Pennsylvania and places like that where it's more expensive. So I don't know, right? But that's the second thing I'm looking at. And the last thing is this. Just turn out on election day. Everybody on both sides is engaged, right? Everybody, Trump voters are engaged. Harris voters are engaged. There's a recent poll that said that Democrats have not been this excited about an election since Obama in 2008. So those are the three factors. I'm looking at the early voting and whether or not it's cannibalizing. I'm looking at election day voting, and I'm recognizing who are the late breakers. So that's the three main things I pay attention to.
Let's say hi to some people. Dr. Tachi is watching from Fort Lauderdale. I see Rose is watching from Connecticut. And by the way, when you hear these places or states, if there's anything you want to add to that, Jason, you can.
I'm in College Park, so there we go. Hi, Silver Spring.
Yes, hi, Silver Spring. Dr. Tachi is in Fort Lauderdale, and we have also Florida in the house with Paula Kiger saying hello from Tallahassee. What has changed for people who were paying attention few cycles ago when it used to all come down to Florida? Florida was more purple, and then now it's become so red. Can you explain that a little bit? And do you see it swinging back at all?
No. Well, it's weird. There are some analysts out there that insist Florida is in play. I don't think it is. I have not heard from anyone in Florida who thinks that Florida is competitive. And we have to understand what I mean by when I say competitive, meaning, is there a chance that Donald Trump doesn't win Florida? I don't think so. I think he's going to win Florida fairly comfortably. But the issue with competitiveness is, what is the margin by which you win, right? So, for example, if Donald Trump only wins Florida by 2%, that would speak very well for how Harris is doing overall, how Democrats are doing overall, right? So that's what I mean by competitiveness. It's not just who's going to win it, but what margin are you going to win it by? Pennsylvania is competitive, but Pennsylvania tends to lean blue, right? So competitive is, would it stay a blue state? It has in, 10 of the last 11 cycles, right? But is that Democratic victory, is it by 2 points, 5 points, or 10,000? We don't know, right? So that's what we mean sort of by competitive. I think it's also important to remember that for the most part, we're not going to know a lot of things for a day or two. It takes a long time to count votes in Georgia. It takes a long time to count votes in Milwaukee. It takes a long time to count votes in Arizona. So I think, people who get stressed about this stuff, they need to recognize this is not going to be a quick process. Ethical counting of votes and human error and everything else like that, it takes time. And that presumes that we don't have any sort of anomalies. That assumes we don't have power outages. That it means, look, we've seen 3 different stories, one in Arizona, one in Washington, one other state, where you have people attacking ballot boxes. And I suspect 9 out of those 10 people are Republicans, just because the Republican Party as a whole has promoted this idea for 3 cycles now that anything other than a Trump victory is a result of cheating, right? So we don't know what happens election night. We just not only do we not know the results, and we won't know them for a while, but we also don't know what kind of external things may occur that mess things up.
Thank you for setting that stage for us. By the way, Tim's watching from Pennsylvania, and this is where people abroad will be wondering, how does it come down to these few states in such a big country, 50 states? How does it come down to this? So can you explain that a little bit? And folks, if you have questions, we have the professor in the house. So please let us know your questions. And we have him with us for about another 30 minutes. So let's go with some great questions for him as well. So go ahead, Professor.
So the easiest way, I'll make a sports reference here. So in a soccer match, right? Football match for anybody outside the country, because I don't know enough about cricket. But in a soccer match, you have time of possession and then you have the score, right? So you can have a team that wins the soccer match 3-0 or 3-1, right? But the other team actually has more time of possession. They had the ball for more of the 90 minutes, the three different sections you sort of have. That's more or less how the United States electoral system works. So you have the popular vote, which is like your time of possession. That is how many people actually voted for this particular candidate. But we don't count things that way in this country. We use something called the Electoral College, which is every single state has a certain number of points, and you have to have 270 points to win the presidency. So while you may have more people vote for you, if you don't have enough people voting for you in the right places, you do not win enough points, and therefore you don't win the presidency. So we saw that happen in 2020, right? Where George Bush won the Electoral College. He did not win the popular vote. He lost the popular vote by a few hundred thousand, right? We saw in 2016 the same thing happen, where Donald Trump won the presidency, right? Because he won the Electoral College, but he lost the popular vote by like 3 million. It is an inherently unfair system. It is a system built in because of slavery. Because in the founding of this country, the presumption was, even though you had states that had large numbers of enslaved Black people, those people, of course, were not allowed to vote, but the white people who ran those states still wanted to use those Black bodies for the purposes of getting members of Congress and having power. So it's an inherently unfair system. It doesn't make any sense. It is not democratic that the person who has the most people who likes them doesn't win. But like I said, that unfortunately is how our system operates.
And therefore it can be confusing for people. And it seems like different states come into play in different times. Ohio was a bellwether, and now it seems to be firmly Republican, though that's where the dogs and cats and immigrants story came up. Is there any chance that Ohio will lose Trump will lose some of his support there?
Oh, not a chance. Look, the thing about the Electoral College is it's also determined by population changes. So I lived in Ohio for about 7 years. So I was there for at least 2 presidential cycles. And I saw as the state moved from an absolute necessary swing state to sort of an afterthought. That coincides with the state losing population. I think Ohio went from 18 Electoral College votes to now I think they're down to 16. If memory, I could be wrong, but I think they went from 18 to 16 after the 2020 census because people are moving away from the state. And where do people from Ohio go to? They move to Arizona. They move to Nevada. They move to Georgia, right? So some of this stuff is a reflection of population shifts. Same thing with Florida. Florida used to be a swingish state. Obama won it in 2008. Obama won it, I believe, in 2012. But now it's a solidly red state. Why did it happen? Well, you had a lot of people, a lot of Republicans and conservatives actually moved to the state. It used to be that Florida was filled with liberal retirees from the Northeast. So New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, snowbirds would come down there. Nope. They now either stay in their states or they go to places like South Carolina where it's a bit cheaper. So internal migration within the country has a lot to do with what is and is not a swing state. And let's be clear, people moving from state to state doesn't mean that their partisanship changes, right? If I move from Ohio to Nevada, right, and I'm a Republican, then that may shift Nevada towards Republicans, right? But if I am a Democratic or a Democratic leaning indie voter and I live in New Jersey and I take a job down in Atlanta because it's like, hey, we can buy a whole house here for $400,000 and for $400,000 we can barely get ourselves a nice condo in Jersey or in Newark. That's why people move. So it's some of this is just purely a demographics issue. And we can't make assumptions about new voters. That's why I said like 300,000 new voters in Atlanta. I would assume most of those people are probably from up north. They're probably more likely to be Democrats, but it's no guarantee.
These are all the vagaries of the American system that people find difficult to understand. Kaveri says this is what the rest of the world cannot understand. It's so unfair. And when I try to explain to people that the reason the Electoral College exists like this is that it cannot change. One of the questions Kaveri asked is, can it change? The small states where they have the same amount of power as the big states, because the same number of Senate seats, they would have to voluntarily give up that power that they have in order to change the Constitution and all of that. That's not going to happen. Why would they vote against their interests that way?
No, because if you, so the simplest way, right, would be the Electoral College no longer matters for the presidential election, right? So let's just say at a very basic level, we just change the Constitution and say popular vote wins the presidential election. Okay, fine, right? But you would then have people arguing, well, if you're going to say that the presidential election is just determined by popular vote, why wouldn't we do the same thing with senators and members of Congress? And then you're definitely going to get what you're saying, which is people in Montana are like, no, we like having 2 senators. Even though, you know, the entire population of Montana is probably the population of the DC metropolitan area, right? But they don't care. Here's what I think it would take to change the system. And I mean this sort of cynically and glibly, but it's true. The system only ends up being changed when someone that the forces in power don't like wins, right? If Kamala Harris won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote by 3 million, if America elected a Black woman president of the United States based on our technical rules instead of the actual popular vote, oh, I promise you, there will be a massive move in this country to get rid of the Electoral College. It's kind of like I've said for years, you know, if you ever wanted real gun control, have 100,000 Black and Latino men march on the Capitol with gun licenses. Oh, I think you suddenly see a real change in gun control in this country. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it changes anytime soon. It should, you know, but you don't have enough people in positions of power to make that move, and you have a lot of self-interested people who wouldn't want to. Same thing applies with changing the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is an absolute corruption, dysfunctional institution at this point. It needs to be remade. It needs to be expanded at the very least. But you don't have enough people in the Senate or the House who actually want to see that happen.
You touched on so many things. Let's focus on Supreme Court for just a moment. We're at 6-3 now. We used to be at 5-4 either party for decades, and that kind of situation allowed for some kind of balance. But now we're 6-3, and what I tell people is that if Trump is elected, he will surely get one more seat at least, and you're talking about 7-2. What does 7-2 mean? 7 justices appointed by Republicans versus 2 appointed by Democrats mean for America's judicial system?
Frankly, that would be the last issue, because the most important one is if Donald Trump were to be elected president of the United States, and if he were to win directly, right, he wins the Electoral College or he wins the popular vote in Electoral College, the consequences for everything from our legal system, the Supreme Court is the last on the list. They would destroy the Department of Justice. The FBI would become a joke. Police would be allowed to just sort of run rampant. So I wouldn't be that concerned about the Supreme Court. I'd be concerned about all the other things. Now, if the election on Tuesday were to come down to a Supreme Court decision, that would be an issue of concern. But I don't know that that's going to happen. You have multiple arguments about that, right? My friend and colleague, Elie Mystal, he just wrote in The Nation about this idea that, well, you know, what happens if a state like North Carolina, let's say North Carolina goes for Vice President Harris, right? It'd be the first time, it'd be only the second time in 30 years or whatever that North Carolina ends up going for a Democrat. But they have a Republican-controlled state legislature. What if they decide we just won't report our final vote, right? We won't give the information to Congress. There's all sorts of tricks that could come into play, and then you could conceivably be at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court would have to determine, well, hey, maybe they don't, maybe they don't. I don't know that I think that's going to happen either. I as much as I am sort of convinced at how absolutely compromised the Supreme Court is, they also are generally a bunch of cowards. And I don't know that they would be willing to flip an election if it came down to them only. Maybe they would. Maybe they would. I don't know. They will let Trump off on half a dozen things. They will give him absolute immunity. If it's close, they'll lean in his favor. But if the entire presidential election fell down to them, I don't know that they would do it. It's not the year 2000, right? That was a relatively close election. Like I said, I think it was only a few 100,000 popular vote between Bush and Gore. It is likely that Joe Biden beat Trump in the popular vote by 7 million, right? Hillary Clinton beat Trump in the popular vote by 3 million. I'm assuming Harris is probably going to beat him by 5 million. I don't know that the Supreme Court is bold enough to overturn an election where one side has won the popular vote by 5 million people. So I'm not a Trump victory creates so many different problems before you even would get to the Supreme Court.
Well, excellent explanation of how our system works, as Sarah Berkshire.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And, I want to say, Jason, that you are much more optimistic and a optimistic person than I am in the way you describe that. But thank you. Mary C. Curtis, our great friend, good morning from Charlotte, where she covered Kamala Harris's rally yesterday, last day of the early vote, with Harris, North Carolina candidates and officials, Kerry Washington, John Bon Jovi, lots of enthusiasm and a truly diverse crowd. Trump was also in North Carolina, is in play. See you this evening, because she's going to be hosting with me multiple shows over the next few days. So we're excited to have Mary with us. And one of the points about the South I should bring up, Jason, is that our friend Charles Blow, who's been on the show, the New York Times writer, as you know, has been encouraging Black folks to move back to the South and affect the electoral politics there. We have lots of comments coming in from around the world. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Doug Levy says, the racism and misogyny that I'm seeing among voters, especially as I reach out to swing states, is disheartening. I thought we had evolved more. Irish Stew podcast, right now, the Electoral College favors the GOP. 2 elections in the last 24 years have been decided in favor of GOP, despite the Democrats winning the popular vote. People are pointing out we're live here from New York. And one of the things that I think we should all be thinking about is how are the elections going to, the timing of it. A lot of people care about that. I went back and looked in 2008 by 11:05 or so, 11:05 p.m. Eastern time, Barack Obama had been declared the winner. In 2012, it took till about 1 a.m. because if you remember, Karl Rove went in and said, "Don't call the election, don't call the election." So those you're saying are the best case scenarios in terms of timing to know that night. Otherwise, it's going to be a couple of days or longer because of the mail-in ballots that come in.
Yeah, it's going to take a couple of days. Here's how the math probably works, right? Everybody's got to win Pennsylvania, right? Whoever wins Pennsylvania, and again, I don't think it's a swing state, because that would be like Ohio, right? For 50 years of American history, whoever won Ohio won the presidency. So it went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, that ended in 2012, right? Because since 2016, 2020, you don't necessarily have to win Ohio to win the presidency. So I kind of see it being a very similar situation here. Pennsylvania is the linchpin. In Pennsylvania, I don't know if it's going to take that long, right? If Kamala Harris looks like she's got a pretty healthy lead in Pennsylvania by 1 a.m, it basically really limits the likelihood that Donald Trump could win. That's just a fact. That's not being optimistic. It's just true. It's not because it's 19 electoral points. It's because it is unlikely that there will be a break in all 4 of the, what they call the blue wall, which is Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, right? It's unlikely that you're going to have a break, right? So if Harris ends up winning Pennsylvania, probably a decent chance she wins Wisconsin, probably a decent chance that she wins Michigan. If Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania, and it looks fairly confident he won Pennsylvania, then, that probably works well for him. So that's the thing. That's the only state that kind of really, really matters one way or another. if Donald Trump doesn't win Pennsylvania, he's got to do a full sweep: North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and I think probably Nevada. Right? He's got to win all 4. Right? If Harris loses Pennsylvania, she would still win if she won, I think, like one of North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, or something else like that. Right? So you're in a situation where multiple people have different ways to get there. So that's the way I look at the states. But again, this stuff is going to take hours. I don't think anybody should I don't think people should be filled with that much anxiety. Just understand that you probably won't know the first night.
Yeah, and look at what we're seeing on the screen. Arizona could take days. Nevada could take days. Wisconsin would likely to finish. Georgia counts fast, depends on the vote margin, and Pennsylvania may take time. So let's talk about a couple of these states. Michigan, and we're in this very unusual position where Donald Trump is going to Michigan and saying, "I am the candidate who will help Muslim voters." It's just the incongruity of that is just kind of mind-boggling. Talk about that a little bit.
Here's the thing. I am the last person on the planet to tell people who are concerned about what's been happening with Israel and Gaza that their feelings aren't valid. I mean, that's just the truth. And so you have a large number of Muslim American voters who are unhappy with the Biden administration's position. They're obviously unhappy with Israel's position, and they're very frustrated. Makes perfect sense to me, right? The issue is where those voters eventually go. Now, most of the polling I've seen, CARE, Center for the CARE sort of does a poll every year. It showed that, there's an 18, 20-point drop of Arab Americans, Muslim Arab Americans voting for the Democratic candidate, right? And if that happens, that can make Michigan way more competitive. I don't know if people are making a decision between Trump and Harris, or people are making a decision between Harris and Jill Stein, or if they're just choosing to stay home. We're probably not going to know that until election night. I think it's also important to remember that when we talk about Arab Americans, it's the same thing as saying, Latino Americans. There's a difference between if you are a second generation Mexican American living in suburban Austin versus if you live in LA versus if you're Mexican American and you live in Michigan, right? Or if you're El Salvadoran or Cuban or you're Puerto Rican, right? These are not all the same place. These people have different cultural histories and different experiences when their families came to this country, right? It's the same thing with Arab Americans. There's lots of Arab Christians who tend to be very conservative, right? So who knows, right? I think there's an unfortunate flattening in too many discussions about the Arab American vote where we don't make the distinction between Arab Americans and Arab Americans who are Muslim, Arab Americans who are Christian. Same sort of thing, important to take into consideration. 20% of Muslim Americans are African American. 20%, right? No one ever talks about that. There are lots of Black people who are Muslim in this country who might also have feelings about what's going on. So that's Michigan. I think Michigan is probably going to be very tight, but I don't get the impression, and this would be my overall, to the degree that you can derive anything from where candidates are spending their time, and I don't know that you can anymore. The Democrats seem to be more confident about Michigan than the Republicans. That is my guess. That is my guess right now, because these last couple of days, you see Democrats sort of firming up their time there. And Republicans are in places. I mean, Trump's making 4 visits to North Carolina. And here's the thing. Is he not in Michigan because he thinks he's got it? Maybe. Or is he not in Michigan because he thinks he's not going to, and he needs to make sure he doesn't lose North Carolina? Because like I said, if any of those Sun Belt states, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, if any of those go to Harris and she gets Pennsylvania, the race is over. So I think it is, and this is the beauty of political science, to be perfectly honest with you. If you'd asked me a month and a half ago, I always say, don't follow the polls, follow the campaigns. Watch where they're going. because that tells you what their internals are saying. If they're spending a lot of time here, it must mean this is where they think they need to work, blah, blah, blah. But what have we seen over the last 2 weeks? We saw Trump at Coachella in California. He's not going to win California. We saw Trump at Madison Square Garden. He's not going to win New York. You know, we saw Harris in Houston. Okay, yeah, Beyonce was there, but she's not going to win Texas. And Colin Allred is not going to beat Ted Cruz. So I think we've also moved to this point where some of this is about the campaigns and some of it is about the fact that both campaigns know that wherever you go, the press is going to follow you. So it may not be indicative of what they think their internals are in those states.
Thank you. We have just less than 10 minutes left. So we're going to do quick questions and quick answers.
Sure.
But here's an important question from Rose Horowitz. Will abortion rights be one of the key issues, as everyone's been saying? Will it actually turn out to be that way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing I think that all humble political scientists and pollsters should understand, it's that people are very unhappy about the Dobbs decision, and they are voting because of that. Now, again, I don't know that this determines the election, but almost every single pollster I have seen publicly, and then people who I've talked to with internals, I have lowballed it. I think that Harris might get 5 to 8% of the Republican vote. Okay. I have heard campaign insiders say that she's getting anywhere from 10 to 13. And I am fairly confident that those numbers are driven in part by abortion. That may not be a single issue, but that is a big issue. And I think that in 2022, a lot of pollsters, they underestimated how significant that was going to be. I know that when I have talked to my Republican contacts, I literally had a guy tell me, he's like, yeah, we think that the sort of anger about Dobbs has died down a bit. I'm like, who are you talking to? Okay. I mean, like, there's a reason that we're seeing some of these gender gaps that we're seeing. There's a reason that Harris is doing so well with seniors, right? And it's in part because people who remember life before abortion was legal do not want to go back to that. So do I think there's a lot of single issue voters on abortion? Not necessarily, but I do think it's going to have a huge impact on turnout and interest.
Thank you very much. John's checking in from the Upper West Side, back from Belfast in Northern Ireland, where they were paying close attention. And this is that election, I think you'd say, Jason, that people around the world are paying attention because it matters what America does, for better or for worse, around the world. It makes a difference, and people are reacting to that.
So I spent the 2012 election night between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. I was in Doha. I was in Qatar working for Al Jazeera. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching the results come in. And it's Al Jazeera, so it's international, right? There's people there from all over the world who work there. And when Obama won, it was not cheers. It was a sense of relief. Okay. It was just a sense of relief. It was like, okay, good. You dopey Americans didn't pick the terrible guy. You know, America gets the sniffles. Everybody else in the world gets the flu. So it really does matter how we decide. I don't envy having to watch a nation full of oftentimes highly misinformed people make decisions that affect everybody else on the planet. Americans don't have to care that much about the Mexican presidential election, even though Sheinbaum was really important. Americans don't have to care that much about whether Trudeau gets reelected. Americans didn't have to care if Sunak got reelected. I knew he wasn't going to in England, but that wasn't going to have that much of an impact. But everybody else has to watch what we do. It is for me as a political scientist, it's humbling, but I think all too many Americans are completely oblivious to how our decisions here locally impact the rest of the world.
And even awareness of our impact in the world is very low. Wayne from the New York Times design desk asked, can you briefly explain internals and how they differ from polls the media report?
That's an excellent question. Thank you, actually. So internals are the polls that the campaigns themselves use. They guard those like your mom's pearls, right? Like they guard those. Internals are arguably more reliable than public polls. Why? Well, because their jobs are dependent on them, right? So an internal poll is maybe conducted every single day, every single week. Internal polls may ask questions that national polls don't ask. Internal polls are more specific. I'll give you a perfect example, right? Republicans may look at Wisconsin and say, all right, Harris is up by 1 in Wisconsin. That's what New York Times Mara says. But our internal polls show that we're going 50-50 with independent voters, right? Because we spent more time looking at independents than the New York Times. So they may be more confident privately about Wisconsin than the public polls demonstrate, right? So internal polls are the real indicator as to what the campaign is doing. And most people don't know what the internal polls are unless you're in the campaign. Now, I have access to them because I know people in both campaigns, right? But your average person does not, and your average national pollsters do not.
And that's a great explanation. Thank you very much. We just have a couple of minutes left. Debbie says they're watching closely north in Canada, and Rose is quoting you about abortion having a huge impact. Before you go, I want you to tell us about your work. Where can people find you? What are the things you're focusing on? As well as I hear something about a graphic novel.
Yeah, so a quick overall. If you would like to follow my analysis, it's always great. You can always follow me on Instagram, Dr. Jason Johnson, Dr. Jason Politics. Twitter is Dr. Jason Politics. That's where I'll be doing a lot of my analysis if I'm not on the air, if I'm not on the radio. If you have any sort of questions where you want to actually sort of reach out to me, that's the best place to do it. I will be appearing on MSNBC probably sporadically over the next couple of days. I'll be on Sirius XM satellite radio. I suggest you listen to my last 2 podcasts. One, a week ago, I sat down with Ben Tinsley of Capital B News. We had a whole discussion about the impact and the importance of African-American male voters. So listen to that on my Slate podcast, A Word. You can find that wherever podcasts are available, or you can just look it up on slate.com, A Word with Jason Johnson. If you need a palate cleanser, if you're freaking out over the last 48 hours and you don't want to listen to politics for a minute, you can listen to my podcast this week, A Word with Jason Johnson, where I sat down and interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's right. Neil deGrasse Tyson and I had a great conversation where we talked about science and politics and Star Wars and his brand new book. So it was a wonderful conversation. And if you want to spend 25 to 30 minutes not thinking about polls and non-doom scrolling on Twitter, I strongly advise it. My plans for 2025, I'm working on a graphic novel. I'm extremely excited about this project. I'll have more detail and more information as we finish things up. That's actually what I'm doing on election day because I have a deadline, but it is an amazing story. Imagine sort of a combination of Django Unchained and Hidden Figures. It is a true story about a group of Buffalo soldiers and an amazing mission that they went on during the Spanish-American War. So most people don't know anything about it. It was suppressed by the U.S. military and American newspapers, but I'm super excited about it, and that's what will be coming out in 2025.
All right, there'll be at least some good news in 2025. So
yes. That there'll be that, and probably more. I tell people this all the time. You can read all the tea leaves you want. You can drink all the tea you want. At the end of the day, America survives, right? Like the country is going to survive. What condition we survive in, you don't know. Go out, vote, make your phone calls, and wait till Thursday. We'll probably know by then.
All right. Patricia says, congratulations, Dr. Jason. Kaveri says, fantastic educational chat with Dr. Jason. So clear and succinct. Everyone follow him, find him, follow him. Stay tuned. He's going to jump, but we're going to read the New York Times. Thank you, Jason. We really appreciate your time. And good luck with all your coverage and get that throat fixed. I can hear it.
I know. Yeah, you guys, look, this is a testament how happy I was to do this. I am suffering from a horrible cold. You can see I'm hot. I'm sweating. I've turned up the heat in my house so I can get over the cold before I go over the air. So thank you guys. Thank you for suffering through with me as I suffer through my cold.
You were great. Thank you and good luck. All right, folks, that's Dr. Jason Johnson. You're going to find him online and you're going to follow him and listen to him. And now Neil and I are going to read the Sunday New York Times with you, give you a sense of where we are with the elections. But first, we want to tell you that this is just the first of 8 hours of live programming over the next 4 days through Wednesday. So we started right now, Sunday morning. You can see there we started at 8:30 a.m. We will also be live again at 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight. We are going to be doing our special election coverage. Then Monday, 9 p.m. and Tuesday, noon and 9 p.m. we will be on the air. And then at 11 p.m. All those shows so far we've described are all on Scroll. And then on the Indian Express U.S. election show will be at 11 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be fantastic opportunity to understand what's happening with the elections. And then we're going to do a wrap up the next morning, Wednesday morning, back on Scroll. We're going to be talking about the elections. We're going to look at the news coverage. We're going to really understand where we are and how the elections are going. As we heard, unless there is a big break to Harris or to Trump, we are not going to know the results on Tuesday night itself. But it'll be Wednesday morning in many parts of the world, and we will be live with you as well. Neil, that's a lot of work as the executive producer. I get to be on the air and chit chat. You're doing the hard work of producing these shows. Thank you for signing up to do them.
Absolutely. I wanted to let people know that we have breaking news in terms of tonight's show. We're going to be on the air tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. India Standard Time. And our guest is going to be Cliff Albright from Black Voters Matter. So we're very excited that he'll be joining the show this evening. They'll be talking about all the work they've been doing to get out the vote across the country. With a very important constituency. So we're looking forward to his insights. And of course, as Sree mentioned earlier, Mary C. Curtis will be joining us for these shows, providing her insights, analysis, and more. So we hope you'll be able to join us. We will be setting up the links for these shows and putting them on Sree's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. We're also going to be on Scroll's channels. We will set up the page and show that to you before this show is over. Sree, what a great conversation with Jason Johnson. To get him in between his MSNBC shows this morning was no small feat. So we are just lucky that he was able to squeeze us in this morning. But now we have a lot of newspaper to take a look at. And I want to actually start, Sree, if you don't mind, before we go to the hard copy. There's a special article that I want to share with folks to kind of set the stage for what to expect on Election Day in terms of the coverage. The New York Times has put together a really interesting article, what to expect. Actually, more than just that one article, several articles on their Times Insider page, which we're going to show in just a second, and we'll share the link. So your questions about our election coverage answered. We'll share that link in our channels. But if you scroll through, in a race for Congress, a reporter starts with a blank notebook. What's it like to tail the vice president? From swing states to drive-throughs on the campaign trail with Trump. And more importantly, I think for a lot of our readers, how the homepage comes together on election night. This is a great piece by the New York Times. We'll share the link in our post. It's about being prepared, but also being able to pivot, said Justin O'Neill, one of the editors who programs the homepage at night. So for folks who are interested in the process and behind the scenes for journalism, this article is for you. Make sure you check it out, and we'll share more about it later. So Sree, let's get to the New York Times.
Yeah, I want to thank Patricia, who says, thank you for your diligence and service. And by the way, Dr. Tachi says that Dr. Johnson was excellent. And Dr. Tachi says we're providing fantastic coverage. Thank you. We're live for at least 8 hours during these 4 days. I've got to say, as much as it is as a service, it's also for me to avoid my pre-TSD. It's a term that people are using now before you're already kind of so spent by the tension of the next few days. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm also writing my newsletter, and I'd love everyone to go to sreenet.substack.com and sign up for my newsletter if you haven't already. Substack.com, look for Sreenet or Sree's Sunday Show, and there you will find my last several issues have all been about the elections. Last time was about Elon Musk. I said Elon Musk must not win. He would burn this all down for the attention, for the giggles, for the likes. And also about Kamala Harris, I said that women's issues, so-called women's issues, are everyone's issues, including your uncle who is disinterested in a swing state. So those are some of the ways in which we are trying to keep busy and cover the elections. And we're very grateful to our partners at Scroll, Indian Express, and everyone who reads, opens our material, hits share. Right now, just tag a friend and they can watch us live or later on any of these channels. If you follow us, please hit subscribe, put on the notifications so you'll know when we're live over the next few hours. I do want to tell you that this comes from our work that we did during the pandemic. We were live every single day, and we have a graphic to show you of how we were live for 293 days, including weekends. We had 200 episodes. This is just the first 200 days. We had more than 1 million viewers, and we counted the number of female guests we had because it's that important. You see way too many male-only shows when you're doing these panel discussions. And we had guests from 67 cities and 19 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. And my colleagues, Rose Horowitz and Vandana Menon, did such a great job working every day during the pandemic, weekends, holidays, and just worked to tell the story of the pandemic. And this is one of the sad things, is that the pandemic is over, and Donald Trump has made it possible for people to forget that the pandemic was terrible for Americans. If they remembered, there is no way they would be voting for Donald Trump. He has convinced them that it was all great. In fact, it was terrible when he was president. America has 5% of the world's population and had 20% of the COVID deaths. That's a failure of leadership at the government, the federal level, state level, municipal level, every level of America, but led by Donald Trump. The greatest recession since the Great Recession happened with the pandemic, and still he now says things were better then. Americans' short-term memory is something to behold. All right, let's look at the news. I just want to first glance at yesterday's newspaper. This is November 2nd. The lead story is Fight for House will be decided by a narrow slice. 24 states in play will decide where we go with the Congress, Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And working class proves elusive for Democrats. Economic spheres swing support for Trump. One of the things that we need to tell people, and so the folks understand, is that America's recovery from the terrible pandemic economy has been better than almost anywhere in the world for an economy of this size. And of all people, The Economist has on their cover a headline that says, "The envy of the world." So the world knows America's economy is doing well, but not Americans. And that I blame the way the story is told. I blame the media. I blame Democrats for not telling that story enough and telling it properly. Russian advances leave Ukraine in a dim place. And Rose Horowitz had pointed out, we're not talking about Ukraine much or at all. And then this is a story from Gaza, farmers trying to feed Gaza. And you can see here in the rubble is the damage that's been done. All right, the lead story in this Sunday edition of the New York Times, Trump uses 20 playbook to lay groundwork for dispute. He and allies spread distorted reports inviting chaos if Harris wins race. And where the trail has led them shows you where they've gone. Kamala Harris has done, and Tim Walz have done 193 appearances, while Donald Trump has done 172 appearances, he and J.D. Vance. War payments have Russians rolling in cash all over town, spoils of risking one's lives. I guess soldiers are being paid. Progressive ideals losing a grip on the country, the news analysis by Jeremy Peters. White women ask their own to back Harris. And ads tell voters they can flip just this once. And dead poet talking, Polish radio experiment bears pitfalls of AI. So I'm looking forward to understanding what this story is about. We do a lot of work around AI and AI workshops, helping people understand what's happening here. So let me take a look. We have comments coming in. Dan Foreman says, thanks for helping us remember reality. And Dan's helping us produce our coverage. We're so excited to have Dan with us. And good morning from Manhattan, says Dr. Lippy Roy. We have about 30 minutes left. And Neil, we have a lot of stuff to cover. So I'm just going to quickly just look through the paper and see if there's anything that catches my eye. Tips on making your commute actually enjoyable. I presume it's got to do with listening to podcasts and things like that. There is the spirit of a party out there. Now they have a car, they can drink and eat. It's a whole new life for them, is a story about the Russian soldiers and others who are so excited about war payments that have been made. By the way, if you're joining us because your clocks didn't reset, it is 1 hour earlier in the United States. And it's, I think, a sign of how poorly America's managed that it still does this when so many other countries have moved past daylight saving. And I'm not a fan of it in any way.
I'm going to ask you, Sree, in terms of sorry about that. When we do have the daylight savings time, how does your body react? I woke up at 5:30 a.m. ready to go, because that's when I get up usually for these shows at 6:30. And I was able to get a little bit of sleep, but I was thrown off this morning. What about you? We lost your audio, Sree. Go again.
We're down to only one clock that isn't automatically changing its time, and so that's been interesting to kind of deal with that. But otherwise, our dog wakes us up because of
same time.
Yeah, she knows that, she thinks it's the same time. So yeah. This is one of the reasons why I'm such a non-fan of this. And of all people, Marco Rubio has introduced legislation to do away with daylight saving time that was useful in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, but not anymore. And that's really one of the things that make me so mad about playing around with the time. In a country like this, where we have so many time zones, it's already complicated enough. And but the changing of the time,
some states don't follow it, and the Europe, England changes it at a different time. Yep. I'll admit, I don't always trust it. I mostly use my phone to check the time. I still Googled what is the time just to make sure, because I'm so confused in the morning. But yeah, it's not fun. What else do we have in the paper?
Nicaragua's Miss Universe wonders if she can go home. I have represented Nicaragua with a lot of pride and honor. I don't represent any political flag, so something about politics in Nicaragua playing out in the Miss Universe pageant of all things. British Tories elect daughter of Nigerian immigrants as party leader, another sign of the change in the world. She is going to have a tough time at the moment anyway, because the government has just changed and they have rejected the Tories. And so this is going to be interesting to see what happens with a black woman as leader of the opposition, conservative opposition of the United Kingdom. How a Lebanese town seeks to avoid the war, trying to bar Israeli troops and Hezbollah fighters in this town. I guess it's a border town, and they're trying to keep themselves safe. So there's so much to try and keep up with the news here, but I want to make sure that we get as many questions and comments from people here. Here's Jonathan saying that Arizona doesn't follow daylight savings time, so that's interesting. And Rose has a comment here about the New York Times lead story online last night about why the Democrats' battle to win the presidential election is so difficult this year. Worth a read. It says American voters' despair about the pandemic and inflation is a major reason why the election, despite the major achievements of the Biden administration. It says the global trend is to overturn the party in power. And that's, we thought that would happen in the UK. It did. It did not happen in France, though we thought it might. So we'll see how it all turns out. And John says, good to see Kaveri Madhavan and Dan Foreman in the comments. That's what's so much fun about the New York Times Read Along. We do this on Sundays, 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time, where we read the paper and talk about the news. And we would love your comments and to see what you're sharing and what you're reading. What are you doing? How are you preparing for the U.S. elections, whether you're in the U.S. or anywhere in the world? We'd love to hear from you. The Sunday opinion cover is Fragile Democracy, Handle with Care. And this week we find out who we are as a nation, the editorial board, and 7 columnists on what this election will mean for the American project. I love that idea that America is a project. That means it's still being built, right? It is still far from a perfect union, a very problematic union with so many issues that it does just badly on, right? We talked about 5% of the population, 20% of the deaths, 5% of the population, 20% of the world's prisoners. Just examples of how America has so many issues that it needs to deal with, systemic issues. You might consider praying what we can do when we don't know what to do. So anybody out there praying hard, let us know. Lessons from 3 years of focus groups. Patrick Healy has been talking to them, so he has item here in the opinion section. Let's go in here. How to end a democracy. Nick Kristof, our friend, says, I see authoritarians abroad. I fear one at home. There are ways to keep autocrats out of power. Why don't we use them is one of the questions here. So please take a look. I'm looking to see if there's an unsigned editorial. Vote to end the Trump era. This is the way in which they have shown why the voters should not vote for Trump, as you can see here. Americans should demand better. Vote is what they say here. And so I'm looking forward to reading all this. Beginning of the end. Times Opinion asked a collection of artists to share a piece of work that they felt spoke to this moment. Their pieces are shared on the cover and in these pages. So you're seeing that this is one of the pieces of art that was made just for the New York Times Opinion section. So much to read here. Here's a palate cleanser that's quite disgusting, not about politics, but young men have taken to the Zyn nicotine pouches that they put in their lips, under in their mouths.
Not exactly a palate cleanser.
A timeline cleanser, talking about something else. Yes.
Timeline. But
Yeah,
I will say, Sree, I remember reading about this or hearing about this several months ago, this Zyn, that they, it's interesting to see it in the Times now. They really did an incredible amount of marketing on social media, TikTok videos and that type of thing, and have gotten young people hooked on it. And it's like the next iteration of tobacco, which is just incredible.
It's more than a buzz. In fact, parents of boys and girls may see this and not realize how dangerous it is because it doesn't look dangerous, right? So
exactly.
that's one of the things. It's more than just a buzz. They're a new symbol of American masculinity and surprise political lightning rod. So I was wrong every way. This is not a palate cleanser in any way. When Eve and Eve took a bite from the apple, in the 2016 essay, a writer struggles with her love with being a good Christian. Modern Love turned 20 last month, and as part of the celebration, we're republishing previous essays that's pretty cool. And we're going to try and see for Valentine's Day if we can get the editors back. We, of course, had Daniel Jones live on the air for our 2020 Valentine's Day. A second job as a makeup artist for a makeup artist is entrepreneur. And this is about Lisa Eldridge. What else is here? Party dropouts. In our circle, many couples insist on one partner who's dynamic and interesting and who is, well, a dud. Usually it's the husbands who are dull. Okay. I wonder what the question is over there. Political messaging tied up in a bow. One thing that might be fun to do, Neil, is if you have the SNL segment, we could play a little bit of that if it doesn't get us in trouble with copyright, because it was interesting to see Kamala Harris on the air. They diverted the plane that was going to the Midwest to bring her to SNL, to New York City, live at 11:30 p.m. last night. I watched it live. I was nervous about it, but I thought it was a home run. She did so well. And, is it going to change anyone's mind? But if there are people who are truly undecided, and they just see her, and you say, well, is this somebody I'd like to have a beer with? Is this somebody I'd like to have a cocktail with, a drink with, a lunch with? I think she came across really well. The question I ask my male friends who are voting for Trump, would you allow your daughter to have lunch with Donald Trump? It's not whether you would have a beer, but would you let your daughter have a beer with Donald Trump, or visit with him, or have dessert or anything like that? And to a person, they say no. And that tells you something about the character of the person there. Neil, did you get to watch?
Absolutely. No, we definitely watched it last night. And I think that if nothing else, I mean, there wasn't anything serious about it. It was just a lot of fun. It was great to see Kamala Harris and Maya Rudolph looking at each other in a mirror and finishing each other's sentences, etc. I think that Saturday Night Live has kind of gone up and down in terms of its relevance in terms of the zeitgeist, but having Kamala Harris on the Saturday before the election was a coup. But like you said, I don't know if it's going to make a difference necessarily. It just, at least for the folks who were supporting her anyway, it gives you a little bit of a lift, a little bit more kind of a sense of that she can let loose and have fun. Let's just hope this works on Tuesday, Sree.
Yeah.
Did you vote early, or are you voting on Tuesday?
Well, I love voting on election day, so we're going to do that. And it'll be a long line, but that's part of the energy of it that's really important. A friend of mine who is elderly and is in poor health, she wanted to vote, and so we filled in the ballot and we mailed it so that her vote is in. And she wanted to be able to vote for the first Black woman, the first South Asian woman to be president of the United States. This anti-DEI agitator strikes fear into big companies. We're seeing a lot of those kinds of issues. And then looking to return to the top of the pack, Ben Sherwood and Joanna Coles are trying to revive the Daily Beast, which you might remember had a lot of buzz and does not have that much anymore, though they're the ones who, I believe, had the Epstein tapes where Donald Trump is described as one of his best friends and things like that. And Jonathan Borstein says that he voted early and proud of it. And so that's really interesting. Lippy Roy says, I saw Harris on SNL last night, but I'm so surprised. She and Maya nailed that sketch. One of my doormen isn't sure who to vote for, hates Trump, but not sure about Harris. I'll ask him if his daughter would have lunch with Trump. Great question. I think that's great. I voted early for the first time, says Rose. No big lines, but busy. That's great to hear. We are about 20 minutes left of our show. If you have questions, comments about the election, please ask. And Neil, let's remind everyone what we have coming up for the next over the next couple of days. We're very excited to bring you all nonstop coverage, though it's actually lots of stops in between. We're going to be live for 8 hours. We're going to show you the timing so you can see it. This is the first hour, 8:30 a.m. today. We're also going to be live again 9 p.m. tonight, and then 9 p.m. tomorrow. This is all Eastern time. Tuesday, noon Eastern time, and 9 p.m. And then Wednesday morning, a special New York Times read-along looking to understand. So these are all the shows on Scroll. On Indian Express.
Well, I was going to say, before Indian Express, for tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time, the co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter will be our guest. 9 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 a.m. On Monday in Delhi. But then on Tuesday night, 11 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time, we're going to be producing a show for the Indian Express, live election coverage. This is going to be Tuesday night. We may not know anything at that point, but we'll certainly share what we know and what states have already been decided at that point.
Yeah, we will know all of that for sure. We won't know the winner, perhaps, but we'll know a lot. And we have a couple of fantastic guests who are going to be joining us. We can tell you right now about Mary C. Curtis is going to be with us. She's watching right now, but she will be with us starting tonight for the next 4 days. She's going to be active with us, sharing her insights, her thoughts, her comments. We're very grateful to her for that. Recipe for Living is the cover of the New York Times book review. Be ready when luck happens. How easy is that? The answer, not very. But that's one of my favorite expressions. Neil has heard it often, that make your own luck. that there's a comment, there's a quote also from Picasso, it may not be by Picasso, but it's attributed to him, that luck, opportunity exists, it has to find you working, meaning that you have to do the work and then luck can then take it from there, but you have to do the work, and we encourage you to do that. So this is the chef Ina Garten who asked about that, and this is the book review. Stanley Tucci is here, actor and foodie, is a fan of the Nobel Prize winner John Fosse. His own new book, What I Ate in 1 Year and Related Thoughts, is about love, loss, and the passage of time encapsulated by many meals. And John Fosse is a Norwegian who won the Nobel Prize last year. Those are some of the books on his nightstand, Stanley Tucci's nightstand. Neil knows that I love reviewing where I eat and posting it on Google Maps and Google Reviews. I have more than 123 million views of my reviews and photographs on Google Maps. It shows you people are really hungry for food content and understanding the views of other people and photographs of other people as they look at this. The Hidden Globe, How Wealth Hacks the World. This is one of my former students, Tusa Abrahamian's book. In some ways, these extraterritorial domains represent a less conspicuous form of colonialism. And here's that Ina Garten story as well. We haven't looked, Neil, in several months properly at the best-selling books in America. I thought we'll take a second here to do that. Let's see, what's number one? Michael Connelly fiction, The Waiting, The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and Counting Miracles by Nicholas Sparks, and The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. One of the things I've noticed is how often the same authors will have more than one book on the bestseller list. I don't know how it's even possible. It's so hard to do one book that makes it anywhere near, but to be at the top like that, and sometimes it's people I've never heard of. So what's number one? What is the top 5 books in nonfiction? Number one is War by Bob Woodward. It's about Biden as a wartime president. Framed by John Grisham and Jim McCloskey is Our Criminal Justice System Viewed Through the Struggles of 10 Wrongfully Convicted people who achieve exoneration. So John Grisham is in the nonfiction section. From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley. That's Elvis Presley's daughter and former wife of Michael Jackson. The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is the book that's getting all that attention. The author of Between the World and Me travels through 3 locations. Everyone's talking about the parts of his book about Gaza and Israel, but he also went to other places, including the American South, and talked about that. Melania is First Lady, describes her work as a fashion model, and there's some controversy, some of the things she appears to be supporting abortion rights. And Be Ready When Luck Happens, as a Ina Garten book. Revenge of the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Through a series, he explicates the causes of various kinds of epidemics. He also admits where the things that he has gotten wrong. One of the things he got wrong was the power of social media. I made that part of my TEDx New York talk on of how even Malcolm Gladwell can get things wrong. And What I Ate in 1 Year by Stanley Tucci. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I know Neil and Pam pay close attention to what the media their daughter consumes. And that's Jonathan Haidt's book. And Sonny Boy by Al Pacino, of all people, has a memoir that's super successful. Of course, not surprised that it's successful, but it is Al Pacino. The Arts and Leisure cover is How Yellowstone Captured America. As the show heads into its final episodes, Brooke Barnes considers what it means to red states. I've actually seen the show. I think it's pretty compelling. It's Kevin Costner and others in a very interesting role. And here we are just going to bring on the New York Times Magazine, and then we will start to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for watching. Tell us where you are watching from. Dan says, be ready when luck happens. Share with loved ones. Thank you. That's so well put. And Dan says, that's a great quote. I absolutely believe that, and that's been my motto in my life. A Republican movement driven by disinformation has taken over election boards across the country. As voters go to the polls, a certification crisis looms that could threaten democracy, American democracy. This was exactly what Dr. Jason Johnson was talking about. I hope you caught that in his comments. If you missed our guest, Jason Johnson, who had to go to be on MSNBC, he will, the recording of our chat with him will pop up here on all these channels right after we're done. 8:30 Sunday mornings, we're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and the Digimentors.group website. Please check out our website so you can see all the shows coming up. Neil's going to put the card back on so we can see.
We're also live on Scroll's Facebook
Yes.
and YouTube. We're producing
Yes.
this. This is in partnership with Scroll.in in India. India's largest digital news producer. So thank you, Scroll.
Yeah,
We're
they're,
so
they're one
thrilled.
of the most important independent news sites in India, and we did some amazing work for 300 straight days during the pandemic. I'm so grateful to our friends at Scroll, and this is what we did. We had more than 1 million viewers in our first 200 episodes and 148 million social impressions. We interviewed more than 50 doctors, nurses, authors, CEOs, Nobel laureates, all that good stuff we were able to do, and we are so grateful to Scroll. And then we want to tell you on election night, 11 p.m. Eastern, that's Wednesday morning in India at 9:30 a.m. is the Indian Express live from New York. America Decides. I am thrilled to bring you that show as well. Thank you folks so much for being part of this and being here. Let's look at the Times Magazine. Neil, what are you thinking as you go into these shows?
Well, I was going to say, if we haven't done the ethicist in a while, you and I together, if they have it in this week's column, I'm willing to give it a go.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Winging It is about Victoria's Secret's stuff. John Fetterman says Trump is stronger than ever. He's this Pennsylvania senator famous for his hoodies. I'm not sure what else has changed, except that if anything, Trump has become more capable to withstand whatever. And that's an indictment of Americans. An illustrated edition of 1619 Project with newly commissioned artwork and archival images is coming out. And here's the ethicist. Is it okay to keep returning purchases you've worn for months? The answer should be no. But
No.
let's see what my partner loves a large outfitting company that has very generous return policies. Will accept nearly any return within a year of purchase. My partner has been buying fairly expensive items from the store, using them while we travel, and then returning them. Oh my God. Well, this is an ethics question because they allow it. So maybe he says it's okay. Let's see. You've thoroughly given your partner's side of the argument as well as yours. She isn't engaged in deceit or fraud. She's in compliance with the retailer's return policy. Neil, what do you think?
It doesn't matter. It's not a question of the policy. It's a question of what's right, and it's just not right. Plain.
I agree. Protest pins. Each pin became a portal into a version of history I wasn't taught at high school. So these were protest pins that Ariel Lutlin was collecting. Patience rewarded. A chef's take on beautifully ripe ulu or breadfruit in Hawaiian is worth the wait. We can't quite see behind you, but you were in Maui in 2022, and those are the photographs. So did you have breadfruit in Hawaii?
Just a little bit bigger. You might be able to see some of the pictures. The one I like the best is that's my daughter snorkeling right there, and that's a picture of a turtle that she took. I don't know if you can see that picture. But yeah, we had a great time. But I'm Sree. I'm a little bit more cautious when it comes to my food intake. The one thing I have absolute policy against. What are your thoughts on durian?
Oh, durian. Yeah, I'm not a fan of durian which is a Southeast Asian fruit that's very popular in some places. It's an acquired taste that I don't want to acquire. Is what I say about it. It
smells. And I still remember, and this goes back at least 30 years. I remember being at home, and my mom was watching earlier. I don't know if she's still on, but if she remembers, my dad and I were watching TV upstairs. She came into the bedroom with durian that she had cut up and was going to eat, and we both said at the same time, "No, go back."
Gaming democracy. All around the world, leaders are exploiting legal and electoral systems in an attempt to win more power. What will it take to beat them? Amanda Taub's asking this question. And here's coup, crisis, crackdown, election freedom. So that's certainly something we've seen around the world. And Dr. Tachi says, I agree, buying things with the sole purpose to use them and return us, as they say, cringe. Thank you, Dr. Tachi, for saying that. And so we're reading all about various issues here. In remind me, Neil, you don't do this, but here is Sid Sivakumar is made the guy who's made this particular crossword puzzle. He's a MD PhD student at Washington University in St. Louis, training in biomedical engineering and neuroscience. This is 18th puzzle for the Times. The 19th will be coming the super mega crossword in the 2024 edition of Puzzle Mania, our annual print-only game section. At 50 squares by 50 squares, it'll take a month to make and over 700 answers. And I know you had celebrated Puzzle Mania earlier with an editor from the Times. We should do that again at some point.
Yeah.
But this sounds very exciting.
I will say I used to do the crossword puzzle years ago. I used to be able to get through Monday pretty regularly and make some headway with Tuesday. They get harder as you go through the week. What's interesting is that the Sunday puzzle is not actually harder than the other puzzles. It's just bigger. It just takes more effort. But I didn't get much past Wednesday when we were doing it. But I certainly enjoyed it. Sree, you had the magazine out. What about the poem? Let's go back to our roots. Is there a poem in this week's?
Yeah, let's see if there is one. I didn't notice it, but if there is a poem, so one of the things we used to do would be to read the poem out loud, which is kind of fun, and people used to like that. But we, as we ramped up the quality and the amazing guests we had, we just didn't have time to read the poem out loud, and I don't see it in this episode.
And sometimes it's not there. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad. But let's tell people what's happening and where we're going with this. So I'm Sree Sreenivasan, that's Neil Parekh, and you're watching the first of 8 hours plus of live coverage for the election. It's Sunday morning in New York. It's Sunday evening in large parts of the world. We're live on Scroll right now. We're wrapping up the show, but we're going to come back tonight with a show at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so about 11 hours from now, and we're going to have one of the co-founders of Black Voters Matter with us. So that's going to be a fantastic opportunity for us to ask questions. We're doing these shows to teach, to inform, to learn. So please tell us what questions you have and what you would like to know. You can see that we are live a Monday night in New York and 7:30 a.m. in Delhi, and we'll have news, analysis, and special guests. You can find all of our coverage on the New York Times read-along page of Digimentors.group. Please check that out. And here is our QR code. If you have your phone right now and you want to get alerted when we are live, please let us know. Just use our WhatsApp alert that you can see there, and we'd love to have you join us. And we will be live Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday at noon, Tuesday at 9 p.m. And then we will have a very special 1-hour episode of the Indian Express social channels. We'll be live on their website and elsewhere for the episode America Decides. Please join us for that. I know you will enjoy keeping up with the news. Mary C. Curtis is going to be with us, frequent guest on the New York Times Read Along. We are delighted and excited to have her with us. So please join us. And we want to remind everyone that all this work is done by Digimentors, the company that Neil and I work at. We are doing shows like this for our clients. We've done so many important shows, including a show just 2 nights ago about the elections, hosted by Professor Walter Greason. And I learned so much as a guest on that show. And then we also do event amplification. Neil and I are going with our friend Andrew Lee to Dubai for the Dubai Future Forum in mid-November to amplify that. We're also doing AI workshops. There was a time when I had hair and computers used to look different from how people remember them. And now I teach my AI generative AI workshops. They're called My Non-Scary Guide to AI. If you have friends or family anywhere in the world, they can join us live or in person for these sessions. So please check that out. And we would love to talk to you about that. And you can learn more. You can write to me or go to digimentors.group/SreeAI. And we want to thank Muckrack, our sponsors of the New York Times Read Along. They've been with us for 5+ years. We're very grateful to them for their support, their attention. And to all of you, if you'd like to be part of all the things we're doing, please get in touch. And also, my newsletter, which I'm writing right now, is actually, I'm going to do something unusual, Neil. I'm going to show people what my newsletter is looking like at the moment, because we want to show you kind of behind the scenes. So I'm just going to go in here. You are seeing what my last cover was, Elon Musk deserves to lose. And before that, women's issues are everyone's issues, as you can see here, and our scorched earth existence, lessons from Norway. You can see all of that stuff. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to go into our dashboard and go into our posts and go into our draft post that we have here. And it's a note to undecided, persuadable voters. And here's what my headline is, or my opening sentence. I get a lot of replies to this newsletter that boil down to some version of, you only write for your side. I'd like to think I'm a pretty open person when it comes to criticism of my public work, but this is one I always push back on. So in these last 72 hours, before the most consequential election of my lifetime, I'm writing this aimed solely at the folks who are persuadable. You'll find descriptions of 3 Americans you may recognize in your circles: people worried about the economy, people worried about Gaza and Palestinians, and people worried about rising anti-Semitism. And these are my closing arguments to them. So I hope that's a good tease and that you will want to learn more in that. Sreenet.substack.com, Sreenet.substack.com. Neil, it's been a pleasure to get this 7-8 hours of live coverage going. We're not live in a row, but it feels like that because we're going to occupy our time for the next couple of days, Neil.
Absolutely. You mentioned, just before we close, you mentioned the show that we did for Walter Grayson for the Graphic History Company. It was a incredible show. Dr. Grayson, professor of history of Macalester College, was the host. Deidre Everson, the president and CEO of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, was one of our speakers, as was Shauna Vircher, who is a board member with Dialogues in Democracy. She talked about an incredible effort to reach out to voters in hurricane-affected areas in North Carolina and Florida to make sure they can get their ballots in. Imagine having to flee your home and your ballot is sitting on your table, or your ID, etc. What do you do? And of course, Sree joined us as well to offer some insights on how the elections have played out for the South Asian community. As Sree mentioned, this is just an example of the kind of work that we do. And I think it's important to note, Sree, that over the last several weeks, we've had several really important guests on the read-along. Subodh Chandra, from a civil rights attorney from Cleveland, Ohio, who filed charges against Trump and Vance on behalf of the Haitian Bridge Alliance for the comments that they made in Springfield, Ohio. Shauna Vircher was a guest. She's known as the Political Fixer, incredible following on TikTok. We had your former boss, Rashmi Roshan Lal, the editor of This Week, Those Books, offering her political analysis from overseas, based in London. This year, unlike other years, Sree, you got off the sidelines. You've been tried to be neutral, tried to be a little bit more even-handed. But not this year. Can you explain a little bit, just take a moment, why did you choose this year to get so involved?
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. And this will be the last thing we talk about before we go off the air, that for years we've been told that journalists need to be, playing it down the middle. And that's what I've been doing. But there are some issues like the environment where it's just too important for us to make sure that we are not saying, well, on the one hand, there's global warming. On the other hand, there may not be. There is scientific consensus. 97% of climate scientists tell us there's climate change. So like that, when it comes to politics, there can be no sitting on the sidelines, because as everyone is saying, America's democracy is at stake, and the way America goes, a lot of the world goes as well. And don't take it from me. The Economist magazine The Economist magazine says if it had a vote, it would vote for Kamala Harris. The Economist, which is conservative, which is fiscally conservative, which has supported Ronald Reagan and the American conservatism for all of these years, is now saying vote for Kamala Harris. And when that tells you why we're paying much more attention, we still try to be fair on this show. And that's why I was saying that my closing arguments are to people who perhaps will be willing to listen. So with that, Neil, thank you for your work. And to everyone watching, we really appreciate you being with us. We have lots of great comments coming in. And there are no two hands or sides when it comes to facts. So good on you. Thank you very much, Kaveri. We'll have our Irish friend have the last word. And Jonathan says, great show. Thank you very much. And Kaveri, we'll leave you the last word there. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you again, and follow us, hit subscribe, hit those notifications. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
9 p.m. tonight. Join us again for another show. We'll talk to you soon. 9 p.m. tonight Eastern Time, 7:30 in the morning in India. Bye-bye.